Hi, I'm Isabella Chen. Have you ever had your brother's wife scream at you in front of your entire family, calling you a manipulative seductress who was trying to steal her husband, only to discover she had spent months secretly begging you to date him so she could justify leaving him for someone else? That night changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty, and what happened next will show you exactly what people are capable of when their carefully constructed lies start falling apart. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 2 years ago, I was living what most people would consider an enviable life in Portland, Oregon. At 28, I had established myself as a successful marketing consultant, specializing in sustainable business practices, working with environmentally conscious companies to help them communicate their values effectively to consumers who increasingly demanded corporate responsibility. My client roster included organic food distributors, renewable energy startups, and eco-friendly product manufacturers who appreciated my ability to translate complex environmental benefits into compelling marketing narratives. The work was fulfilling because it aligned with my personal values, but it was also financially rewarding in ways that provided genuine security and independence. I owned a renovated loft apartment in the Pearl District, drove a hybrid vehicle that reflected both my environmental consciousness and practical sensibilities, and maintained a lifestyle that balanced professional achievement with personal satisfaction. More importantly, I had built this success through my own efforts, without relying on family connections or compromising my principles for short-term financial gain. My relationship with my older brother Marcus had always been one of the most stable and supportive aspects of my life. Despite the 4-year age difference, we had maintained a close bond that had strengthened rather than weakened as we both established our adult lives. Marcus worked as a software engineer at a prominent tech company, where his methodical approach to problem-solving and natural leadership abilities had earned him rapid promotions and the respect of colleagues who valued his technical expertise and collaborative management style. When Marcus began dating Rachel Morrison 3 years earlier, I was genuinely happy for him. Rachel appeared to be everything he had been looking for in a long-term partner: intelligent, ambitious, and supportive of his career goals while maintaining her own professional aspirations as a graphic designer. She worked for a boutique advertising agency that specialized in creative campaigns for local businesses, and her portfolio demonstrated genuine artistic talent combined with commercial sensibility. During their courtship period, Rachel made consistent efforts to include me in their social activities, often suggesting that Marcus invite me to dinners, weekend outings, and holiday celebrations. At the time, I interpreted this inclusiveness as evidence that she understood and respected the close relationship Marcus and I shared, and that she wanted to build a genuine friendship, rather than creating the kind of tension that sometimes develops when new romantic relationships alter existing family dynamics. Rachel would frequently call me independently of Marcus, suggesting we meet for coffee or lunch to discuss everything from career challenges to personal relationships. These conversations felt natural and supportive, the kind of friendship that develops organically between people who share similar values and life experiences. She would ask for my advice about everything from client presentations to apartment decorating decisions, and I began to view her as not just Marcus's girlfriend, but as a genuine friend in her own right. When Marcus proposed to Rachel after 2 years of dating, I was among the first people they told, and Rachel's excitement seemed completely authentic as she showed me the engagement ring and began discussing wedding planning ideas. She asked me to be her maid of honor, explaining that while she had several close female friends, she wanted someone who truly understood Marcus and could help ensure their wedding celebration reflected both of their personalities and values. The wedding planning process further strengthened what I believed was a genuine friendship with Rachel. She consulted me about virtually every decision, from venue selection to catering options to honeymoon destinations. We spent countless hours together visiting potential locations, tasting menu options, and discussing the details that would make their celebration both beautiful and meaningful. Rachel consistently expressed appreciation for my input and seemed to value my perspective on decisions that would affect their future together. During these months of wedding preparation, Rachel would often confide in me about her hopes and concerns regarding married life. She worried about balancing career advancement with family responsibilities, wondered how to maintain individual identity within a committed partnership, and expressed anxieties about meeting the expectations that came with joining our close-knit family. These conversations felt intimate and authentic, the kind of honest discussions that develop between people who trust each other completely. I shared my own experiences and perspectives, offering support and encouragement while respecting the boundaries appropriate to my role as Marcus's sister and Rachel's friend. When she expressed concerns about career advancement in a competitive industry, I provided connections to marketing professionals who might offer valuable networking opportunities. When she worried about fitting into our family traditions, I explained the history and significance of various celebrations while assuring her that her own ideas and preferences would be welcomed and appreciated. The wedding itself was a beautiful celebration that seemed to represent everything Marcus and Rachel had worked toward together. Rachel looked radiant in her carefully selected dress, and Marcus's happiness was evident to everyone who attended the ceremony. Their vows were heartfelt and personal, referencing shared experiences and future dreams that suggested a deep understanding of each other's values and aspirations. During the reception, Rachel made a point of thanking me publicly for my support throughout the wedding planning process, describing me as the sister she had always wanted and expressing gratitude for the friendship we had developed. The speech felt genuine and heartfelt, bringing tears to my eyes as I realized how much our relationship had come to mean to both of us. The first year of Marcus and Rachel's marriage appeared to strengthen, rather than diminish, our friendship. Rachel continued to call regularly, sharing updates about married life, career developments, and her growing integration into our extended family. She seemed genuinely happy, often describing small domestic moments that demonstrated her contentment with her new life. Cooking dinner with Marcus, decorating their apartment, planning weekend trips that combined relaxation with exploration of the Pacific Northwest. Rachel also made consistent efforts to include me in their social activities as a married couple. She would suggest that Marcus and she host dinner parties where I could meet their friends, recommend restaurants where the three of us could try new cuisines together, and organize group activities that allowed me to feel connected to their social circle without feeling like an intrusive third party. These interactions reinforced my belief that Rachel had successfully navigated the potentially challenging transition from being Marcus's girlfriend to becoming an integrated member of our family, while maintaining her individual relationship with me. She seemed to understand that my close bond with Marcus enhanced rather than threatened their marriage, and that supporting our sibling relationship was actually beneficial to her own partnership with him. During this period, Rachel also began seeking my professional advice about marketing challenges she encountered in her graphic design work. Her agency was expanding its client base, and she wanted to understand how to position herself for advancement opportunities that would utilize her creative talents while building business development skills. I provided guidance about client relationship management, portfolio presentation strategies, and networking approaches that had proven effective in my own career development. These professional conversations further strengthened what I believed was a mutually beneficial friendship. Rachel's questions were thoughtful and demonstrated genuine interest in learning from my experience, while her insights about visual communication and creative problem-solving provided valuable perspectives that enhanced my own understanding of marketing effectiveness. Approximately 18 months after the wedding, I began to notice subtle changes in Rachel's communication patterns and social behavior. Her phone calls became less frequent, and when we did speak, the conversations felt shorter and more superficial than the intimate discussions we had previously shared. When I suggested getting together for lunch or coffee, she often cited scheduling conflicts or work commitments that prevented immediate meetings, while promising to call soon to arrange alternative times. Initially, I attributed these changes to the natural evolution of relationships as people settle into new routines and responsibilities. Rachel's career was advancing, requiring increased time and energy commitments that might naturally limit her availability for social activities. Marcus had also received a promotion that involved additional responsibilities and occasional travel, which might have affected their household routines in ways that reduced Rachel's flexibility for maintaining extensive social connections. However, as these communication changes continued over several months, I began to wonder whether I had somehow inadvertently created tension or misunderstanding that was affecting our friendship. I reviewed our recent conversations and interactions, searching for anything I might have said or done that could have been misinterpreted or caused offense, but I could not identify any specific incidents that would explain the growing distance in our relationship. During family gatherings, Rachel's behavior toward me remained outwardly friendly, but something subtle had shifted in the quality of our interactions. She still included me in conversations and appeared glad to see me, but the warmth and spontaneity that had previously characterized our relationship had been replaced by something that felt more performative, as though she was maintaining appropriate social behavior rather than expressing genuine affection or interest. Marcus seemed unaware of these changes, continuing to speak about Rachel with the same satisfaction and affection he had always expressed. When I cautiously mentioned that Rachel and I had been in less frequent contact recently, he attributed it to her increased work responsibilities and suggested that I should feel free to reach out to her directly rather than waiting for her to initiate contact. Following Marcus's suggestion, I began making more deliberate efforts to maintain our friendship, sending occasional text messages about topics I thought might interest her, forwarding articles related to her professional work, and suggesting specific dates for lunch meetings rather than waiting for her to propose alternatives. Rachel's responses to these overtures were polite but often brief, and her availability for social activities remained limited due to what appeared to be genuinely demanding work and personal commitments. Despite these changes in our personal relationship, Rachel continued to seek my professional advice when she encountered marketing-related challenges in her graphic design work. These conversations felt more like our earlier interactions, with Rachel asking detailed questions about client relationship strategies, portfolio development approaches, and business networking techniques. Her questions were sophisticated and demonstrated genuine interest in learning from my experience, which suggested that her reduced social availability was indeed related to increased professional responsibilities, rather than any fundamental change in her feelings about our friendship. The professional nature of these conversations also provided opportunities for me to demonstrate ongoing support for Rachel's career advancement, while respecting what appeared to be her preference for less frequent social interaction. I could contribute valuable guidance to her professional development without pressuring her to maintain the same level of personal friendship that had characterized our relationship during her engagement and early marriage period. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This equilibrium continued for several months, with Rachel and I maintaining cordial but less intimate contact, while she continued to appear happy and settled in her marriage to Marcus. I accepted that relationships naturally evolve as people's circumstances change, and I focused on supporting both Rachel and Marcus in whatever ways felt appropriate to our current dynamics, rather than attempting to recreate the closeness that had previously existed. The foundation of my life during this period felt stable and secure. My professional work continued to expand and provide both financial security and personal satisfaction. My relationship with Marcus remained strong and supportive, even as his marriage naturally shifted some of his time and attention toward his partnership with Rachel. My friendship with Rachel had evolved but remained positive, and I believed that the changes in our interaction patterns reflected natural life transitions rather than any fundamental problems or conflicts. Looking back now, I can see that this sense of stability was built on incomplete information about the true dynamics affecting my relationships with both Marcus and Rachel. The foundation I thought was solid was actually constructed on carefully concealed deceptions that would soon reveal themselves in ways that would fundamentally alter my understanding of everything I had believed about family loyalty, friendship, and the people I trusted most completely. The cracks in this foundation would appear suddenly and devastatingly, exposing not just individual betrayals but systematic manipulation that had been occurring beneath the surface of relationships I had believed were genuine and mutually supportive. The revelation would force me to question not just Rachel's motives, but my own judgment about human nature and the reliability of the connections that had anchored my personal and emotional security. But before that foundation crumbled completely, there was one final period of apparent normalcy, one last month where I continued to believe that the life I had built was as secure and authentic as it appeared to be. That month would end with a phone conversation that would change everything I thought I knew about the people closest to me, and begin a journey that would ultimately teach me the difference between relationships built on genuine connection and those constructed as instruments of manipulation and control. The recording I made of that conversation would become the evidence that exposed years of deception, but it would also mark the beginning of the most challenging period of my life, when I would discover just how far people will go to protect lies they have constructed, and how much courage it takes to stand for truth when everyone around you benefits from maintaining carefully orchestrated deceptions. The phone call that would shatter everything I believed about my relationship with Rachel came on a Thursday evening in October, 3 weeks after Marcus had left for a 10-day business conference in Denver. I was reviewing client proposals in my apartment when my phone rang at 8:30, displaying Rachel's name on the screen. After months of increasingly infrequent communication, I was genuinely pleased to see her calling, hoping this might signal a return to the closer friendship we had once shared. "Isabella, thank goodness you answered." Rachel's voice carried an urgency that immediately concerned me. "I really need to talk to someone who understands relationships and knows Marcus well. Can you spare some time tonight?" Her tone suggested genuine distress, and my protective instincts toward both Marcus and Rachel activated immediately. "Of course, Rachel. What's happening? Is everything okay with you and Marcus?" "That's exactly what I need to discuss with you," she replied, her voice carrying what sounded like barely controlled emotion. "Isabella, I've been struggling with some feelings that I don't know how to handle, and I think you're the only person who might be able to help me work through the situation." I settled into my desk chair, giving Rachel my full attention while simultaneously feeling concerned about what kind of marital difficulties might have developed during Marcus's absence. "Rachel, you know I care about both of you. Whatever's going on, I want to help in any way I can. Isabella, I need to be completely honest with you about something that's been affecting my marriage for months now," Rachel began, her voice taking on the intimate tone she had used during our closest friendship period. "I've been having feelings that I know are inappropriate, but I can't seem to control them or make them go away." The phrase "inappropriate feelings" in the context of her marriage immediately alarmed me, and I began preparing to provide whatever support might help Rachel work through whatever emotional challenges were affecting her relationship with Marcus. "Rachel, marriage counseling can be incredibly helpful for working through complicated emotions. Have you considered speaking with a professional therapist?" "Isabella, you don't understand," Rachel interrupted, her voice becoming more intense. "The feelings I'm having aren't about Marcus. They're about someone else. Someone who's been part of our lives since the beginning of our relationship." My concern deepened as I began to understand that Rachel might be confessing to romantic feelings for another person, a situation that would require delicate handling to protect both her marriage to Marcus and her emotional well-being. "Rachel, having complicated feelings doesn't make you a bad person. What matters is how you choose to handle those feelings. Isabella, the person I have feelings for is you." The words hit me with such unexpected force that I initially thought I had misheard her statement. "Rachel, I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "Isabella, I've been attracted to you since the first time Marcus introduced us," Rachel continued, her voice now carrying a confessional quality that felt both intimate and disturbing. "At first, I thought it was just admiration for your intelligence and professional success, but over the past year I've realized that what I'm feeling is much more than friendship or professional respect." I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications of what Rachel was telling me. Not only was she confessing to romantic feelings that would betray her marriage to my brother, but she was directing those feelings toward me in a way that would create devastating complications for every relationship in our family. "Rachel, I think you might be confused about your emotions," I said carefully, trying to provide a response that wouldn't make the situation worse, while also not encouraging what appeared to be a completely inappropriate confession. "Sometimes admiration or close friendship can feel like romantic attraction, especially when you're going through stress in other areas of your life." "Isabella, I'm not confused," Rachel replied firmly. "I know exactly what I'm feeling, and I've been trying to ignore it for months because I knew how complicated it would make everything. But Marcus being away on this business trip has made me realize that I can't continue pretending these feelings don't exist." The conversation was moving in a direction that felt increasingly dangerous for everyone involved, and I knew I needed to redirect Rachel toward more appropriate ways of handling whatever emotional confusion she was experiencing. "Rachel, I think you should consider speaking with a professional counselor who can help you understand these feelings and work through them in a way that protects your marriage to Marcus." Isabella, I don't want to work through them, Rachel said, her voice becoming more assertive. I want to act on them. I've been thinking about this for weeks, and I believe you have feelings for me too, even if you haven't admitted them to yourself. The suggestion that I might have romantic feelings for Rachel was so completely inaccurate that I began to wonder whether she was experiencing some kind of psychological crisis that was distorting her perception of our relationship. Rachel, I care about you as Marcus's wife and as someone I considered a close friend, but I have never had romantic feelings toward you. Isabella, I've seen how you look at me during family gatherings. Rachel continued, seemingly ignoring my clear statement about my feelings. I've noticed how you always make time to help me with professional questions, and how you seem disappointed when I became less available for social activities. Those behaviors suggest feelings that go beyond ordinary friendship. Her interpretation of my actions was so fundamentally wrong that I began to realize this conversation represented something far more serious than emotional confusion or marital stress. Rachel was constructing a narrative about our relationship that bore no resemblance to reality, and she appeared to genuinely believe in the accuracy of her distorted perceptions. Rachel, helping you with professional questions and wanting to maintain our friendship are normal behaviors that don't indicate romantic attraction, I explained, trying to remain patient while also being completely clear about the boundaries that needed to be maintained. I think you may be misinterpreting ordinary friendship behaviors because you're going through a difficult emotional period. Isabella, I know you're trying to be loyal to Marcus, but you don't have to protect his feelings at the expense of your own happiness, Rachel replied, her voice taking on what sounded like a coaching tone. Marcus is a good person, but he's not emotionally available in the way that someone like you needs. You deserve to be with someone who truly understands your intelligence and ambition. The suggestion that I needed to choose between loyalty to Marcus and my own happiness revealed how completely Rachel had misunderstood both my feelings and the nature of my relationship with my brother. More disturbing was her implication that she understood my needs better than I understood them myself. Rachel, my relationship with Marcus is not something that limits my happiness, I said, my voice becoming firmer as I realized the extent of her misconceptions. Marcus is my brother, and our close relationship is completely separate from any romantic relationships either of us might have. Isabella, I understand that admitting feelings for me would feel like betraying Marcus, but sometimes we have to choose authenticity over family loyalty, Rachel continued, her voice taking on what sounded like therapeutic language. I've been researching this situation, and emotional attraction between family members through marriage is more common than people realize. The phrase emotional attraction between family members was so inappropriate and disturbing that I began to feel genuinely alarmed about Rachel's mental state. She appeared to be constructing psychological justifications for feelings and behaviors that were completely outside the boundaries of appropriate family relationships. Rachel, there is no emotional attraction between us, I stated clearly, hoping that direct communication might help her understand the reality of our situation. What you're describing as attraction has never existed from my perspective, and I think you need professional help to understand why you're interpreting normal friendship behaviors as romantic signals. Isabella, I can hear in your voice that you're scared to admit your true feelings, Rachel replied, her tone becoming more confident rather than less. I understand that fear, because I've been living with it for months. But we don't have to continue denying what's between us. Her increasing confidence in the face of my clear denials suggested that this conversation was not going to end with Rachel accepting reality and seeking appropriate help. Instead, she appeared to be interpreting my resistance as confirmation of her theories about my supposed hidden feelings. Rachel, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said, adopting the most serious tone I could manage. I do not have romantic feelings for you. I have never had romantic feelings for you. What you're describing as signals or attraction has never existed from my perspective. You are married to my brother, and even if I did have such feelings, which I do not, acting on them would be completely inappropriate. Isabella, I know this is scary, but I've already made peace with ending my marriage to Marcus, Rachel said, her voice carrying what sounded like relief rather than the distress such a decision should have caused. I've realized that I married him because he was safe and stable, but what I really need is someone who challenges me intellectually and emotionally the way you do. The casual mention of ending her marriage to Marcus was so shocking that I initially couldn't formulate a response. Rachel was discussing the destruction of her relationship with my brother as though it were a minor lifestyle adjustment, rather than a devastating betrayal of vows and trust. Rachel, you cannot be serious about ending your marriage based on imaginary feelings between us, I said, my voice rising despite my attempts to remain calm. You're talking about destroying multiple relationships based on a complete misunderstanding of normal friendship behaviors. Isabella, I am completely serious, Rachel replied, her voice becoming more animated. I've been planning this conversation for weeks, thinking through exactly how to approach you about the situation. I know that admitting mutual attraction will feel overwhelming at first, but once we acknowledge what's between us, we can figure out how to handle the practical complications. The word planning was particularly disturbing, suggesting that Rachel had been constructing this fantasy about our relationship over an extended period rather than experiencing a sudden emotional crisis. She had been deliberately cultivating what she believed was a romantic connection, while I remained completely unaware of her intentions. Rachel, there are no mutual feelings to acknowledge and no practical complications to handle, I said, trying once more to establish clear boundaries. What you need to handle is getting professional help to understand why you've developed these inappropriate feelings and how to work through them without destroying your marriage. Isabella, I can tell that you're trying to protect everyone's feelings, but you're actually making the situation more painful for all of us by denying what's obvious. Rachel continued, her voice taking on a tone that suggested she believed she was providing helpful guidance. Marcus deserves to be with someone who's genuinely attracted to him, and you deserve to be with someone who appreciates your intelligence and ambition. Her suggestion that she was acting in Marcus's best interests by planning to leave him for his sister was so twisted that I began to understand that rational conversation was not going to resolve this situation. Rachel had constructed a comprehensive narrative that justified her feelings and actions while portraying herself as acting altruistically rather than selfishly. Rachel, Marcus is genuinely attracted to you and you committed to being with him when you married him, I replied, trying to focus her attention on the reality of her existing relationship rather than her fantasies about alternative arrangements. If you're having doubts about your marriage, those doubts should be addressed through counseling, not through pursuing inappropriate relationships with other family members. Quote, Isabella, I know that Marcus thinks he's attracted to me, but our physical relationship has never felt natural or passionate, Rachel said, her voice carrying a confessional tone that made me deeply uncomfortable. I've been pretending to be satisfied, because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But now I understand that the lack of genuine attraction was because my heart was already committed to someone else. The intimate details about her physical relationship with Marcus were information I absolutely did not want to possess, and her willingness to share such private matters suggested that her boundaries about appropriate conversation topics had become as distorted as her perceptions about my feelings toward her. Rachel, details about your physical relationship with Marcus are private matters that should be discussed with him or with a professional counselor, not with me, I said firmly. I am not the appropriate person for you to confide in about marital intimacy issues. Isabella, you're exactly the right person to discuss this with because you're the person I want to be intimate with, Rachel replied, her voice becoming more direct. I need you to understand that what Marcus and I have is friendship and compatibility, but what you and I could have is genuine passion and intellectual connection. At this point, I realized that continuing this conversation was not going to help Rachel understand appropriate boundaries or seek the professional help she clearly needed. Instead, prolonging the discussion might encourage her to believe that my continued engagement indicated some level of interest in her inappropriate suggestions. However, as I prepared to end the conversation, something in Rachel's tone made me realize that this situation was even more complex than I had initially understood. Her confidence in discussing the end of her marriage and her certainty about my supposed feelings suggested that this was not a spontaneous emotional crisis, but a carefully planned approach to a situation she had been considering for an extended period. Rachel, I'm going to end this conversation now because it's not appropriate for me to continue discussing these topics with you, I said, reaching for my phone to hang up. Isabella, please don't hang up, Rachel said quickly, her voice shifting to a pleading tone. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to understand how long I've been thinking about this and how carefully I've planned our transition from the current situation to something that will make us both happier. The word transition was particularly alarming, suggesting that Rachel had developed specific plans for how this imaginary relationship would develop. Rachel, there is no transition to plan because there is no relationship to develop. I am not interested in pursuing anything beyond appropriate family friendship with you. Isabella, I understand that you're scared, but I've already figured out how to handle the practical complications, Rachel continued, seemingly ignoring my clear statement of disinterest. I know you're worried about hurting Marcus, but I've been preparing him for the end of our marriage by gradually reducing our emotional intimacy over the past several months. This revelation was so disturbing that I felt momentarily unable to respond. Rachel was admitting that she had been systematically undermining her marriage to Marcus as preparation for pursuing a relationship with me that I had never indicated any interest in developing. Rachel, you have been deliberately damaging your relationship with Marcus based on feelings that exist only in your imagination, I said, my voice filled with horror at the implications of what she was telling me. You need to stop this behavior immediately and seek professional help to understand why you've been sabotaging your marriage. Isabella, I haven't been sabotaging anything, Rachel replied, her voice becoming defensive. I've been preparing for a natural transition that will ultimately make everyone happier. Marcus has already started to notice that our relationship feels different, and when I explain that we've both outgrown our marriage, he'll understand that divorce is the best option for everyone involved. The casual way she discussed manipulating Marcus's perceptions and emotions revealed a level of calculated cruelty that I had never suspected existed in someone I had considered a close friend. Rachel had been systematically destroying her marriage while presenting herself as a victim of uncontrollable feelings. Rachel, what you're describing is emotional manipulation and betrayal, I said, no longer attempting to maintain a gentle tone. You have been deliberately harming Marcus while planning to blame your actions on feelings that I do not share and have never encouraged. Isabella, I know you're upset because this situation is complicated, but once you accept that we belong together, you'll see that everything I've done has been necessary to create the opportunity for our relationship to develop. Rachel replied, her voice taking on a soothing tone that felt completely inappropriate given the severity of what she was admitting. At that moment, I realized that documenting this conversation might be essential for protecting both Marcus and myself from whatever additional manipulation Rachel might be planning. Without informing her of my intentions, I activated the recording function on my phone, knowing that preserving evidence of her admissions might be crucial for addressing the damage she had already caused. The recording would capture not only her inappropriate confessions about her feelings toward me, but also her admissions about deliberately undermining her marriage to Marcus and her detailed plans for manipulating the situation to serve her desires. This evidence would become essential when Rachel's manipulations escalated beyond private phone conversations to public accusations designed to destroy my reputation and relationships. But in that moment, I simply knew that I was dealing with someone whose relationship to truth and appropriate behavior had become so distorted that protecting myself and Marcus would require documentation of exactly what Rachel was planning and how far she was willing to go to achieve her imaginary romantic objectives. The morning after Rachel's devastating phone call, I woke with the grim realization that I needed to warn Marcus about what his wife had revealed during our conversation. However, before I could determine the most appropriate way to approach such a delicate situation, my phone began ringing with a series of calls that would expose the true scope of Rachel's manipulative strategy. The first call came from my mother, Patricia Chen, at 7:30 in the morning. Her voice carried a tone of concern, mixed with confusion, that immediately put me on alert. Isabella, I received a very disturbing call from Rachel last night. My mother began without her usual pleasantries. She seemed quite upset and mentioned that you had been making inappropriate advances toward her. I told her that must be some kind of misunderstanding, but she insisted that you had been pursuing her romantically for months. The audacity of Rachel's lie took my breath away. Within hours of confessing her inappropriate feelings toward me and admitting that she had been deliberately undermining her marriage to Marcus, she had called my mother to present a completely inverted version of events that portrayed me as the aggressor in a romantic pursuit that existed only in her imagination. Mother, that is absolutely untrue, I said, my voice steady despite the shock of learning how quickly Rachel had moved to control the narrative. Rachel called me last night to confess romantic feelings toward me, which I firmly rejected. I never made any advances toward her, and I have never had inappropriate feelings about my brother's wife. My mother's pause was longer than I had expected, And when she spoke again, her tone suggested that she was struggling to reconcile conflicting versions of events. Isabella, Rachel was very specific about incidents where you had allegedly made suggestive comments or behaved inappropriately during family gatherings. She mentioned particular conversations and gestures that she interpreted as romantic interest. The fact that Rachel had prepared specific false examples of my supposed inappropriate behavior indicated that her manipulation strategy was far more sophisticated than I had initially realized. She had not simply made general accusations but had constructed detailed fabrications designed to make her lies appear credible and specific. "Mother, I would like you to consider the source of these accusations," I replied carefully. "Rachel has never mentioned any discomfort with my behavior during the years we have known each other. In fact, she has consistently sought out my company and advice. Does it seem logical that someone who was genuinely uncomfortable with inappropriate advances would continue to pursue closer friendship and professional mentoring?" My mother's response revealed the effectiveness of Rachel's strategic approach. "Isabella, Rachel explained that she had been trying to maintain family harmony by not addressing your behavior directly, but that your advances had become more persistent recently, and she felt she needed to seek support from family members." The explanation was brilliant in its manipulation. The comments made at recent family gatherings about marriage motivations and family contributions were completely inappropriate and reflected assumptions that we now understand were entirely without foundation. Eleanor continued, specifically addressing behavior that had prompted my decision to reveal information that would correct their fundamental misunderstandings. Her direct acknowledgement of inappropriate behavior provided foundation for rebuilding family relationships based on mutual respect and accurate understanding, while establishing expectations for future interactions that would reflect appreciation for my character and achievements, rather than suspicion about motivations that had never been accurate. James observed this family processing with visible relief about finally addressing tensions that had been affecting our marriage while creating opportunities for authentic relationships based on complete information rather than partial understanding that had enabled inappropriate assumptions and hurtful behavior patterns. "Mother, Father, I hope you can understand how difficult it has been to watch Isabella endure questions about her character and motivations when the reality of her circumstances and achievements exceeded anything our family had accomplished in terms of both financial success and social impact through business activities," James stated, his voice reflecting years of accumulated frustration about family dynamics that had placed him in impossible positions between loyalty to his wife and relationships with his parents. His expression of these feelings created opportunity for comprehensive family processing of how misconceptions had affected all relationships, while establishing framework for transformed interactions that would serve everyone's interests through mutual respect and appreciation for individual contributions and achievements. The conversation continued with detailed discussion of specific companies and initiatives that I had supported, revealing systematic attention to problems affecting vulnerable populations and environmental challenges that traditional business approaches were not adequately addressing through conventional profit-motivated strategies. Richard's examination of renewable energy projects that had brought electricity to rural communities while generating exceptional financial returns demonstrated recognition of business models that created value for society while building wealth through innovation rather than resource extraction or market manipulation that characterized many traditional investment approaches. Eleanor's growing understanding of educational technology platforms that served students with diverse learning needs reflected appreciation for work that addressed problems she had observed through volunteer activities but had not previously recognized as areas where business innovation could create solutions that served both social needs and financial sustainability requirements. The documentation review revealed patterns of investment decisions that consistently prioritized opportunities where exceptional financial returns aligned with meaningful social impact, demonstrating systematic application of values that Eleanor and Richard claimed to support through their own charitable activities and community engagement efforts. This alignment between my business philosophy and their stated values created foundation for genuine relationship development based on shared principles and mutual respect, rather than hierarchical assumptions about social status and financial contributions that had characterized their previous treatment of me throughout our marriage. The atmosphere in our dining room had fundamentally shifted from formal family dinner to emotional processing session. where 3 years of accumulated misunderstandings required careful untangling through honest communication and vulnerable acknowledgement of how assumptions had damaged relationships that should have been built on mutual support and genuine appreciation for individual character and contributions. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, the physical manifestation of emotional processing that was occurring as she confronted the magnitude of her misjudgments about my character and the profound inappropriateness of behavior that had been based on fundamental misconceptions about my motivations and circumstances. Her composure, typically maintained through decades of social training and community leadership experience, was being challenged by recognition of errors that had created unnecessary pain and family tension. Isabella, I need you to understand that our assumptions about your background were not motivated by malice or deliberate cruelty, but rather by protective instincts that we now recognize were based on complete misunderstanding of your actual character and achievements. Eleanor began, her voice carrying the emotional vulnerability that genuine apologies required when addressing serious relationship damage. Her explanation revealed the psychological mechanisms that had enabled 3 years of inappropriate treatment, while acknowledging that good intentions could not excuse behavior that had been fundamentally unjust, based on the reality of my circumstances and contributions to family well-being. The protective motivation she described reflected common patterns among wealthy families, who worried about exploitation and opportunistic relationships that threatened family resources and social position. Our concerns about protecting family legacy and ensuring that marriages brought mutual benefit rather than one-sided advantage created a framework for evaluating your relationship with James that completely failed to recognize your actual capabilities and contributions. Eleanor continued, demonstrating growing awareness of how their evaluation criteria had been both inappropriate and inaccurate. Richard's processing of this information followed analytical patterns that reflected his business background and systematic approach to problem-solving. When confronted with evidence that required fundamental reassessment of previous conclusions and strategic adjustments based on new information that contradicted established assumptions. Isabella, from a purely objective standpoint, the investment performance documented in these reports represents achievement that commands respect within professional circles where exceptional results are recognized and valued appropriately. Richard stated, his professional assessment providing foundation for personal acknowledgement of errors in judgment that had shaped his treatment of me throughout our family relationship. His willingness to acknowledge professional respect for my achievements created opening for addressing more personal aspects of family relationships, and the emotional damage that had been caused by assumptions about my character that had never been based on accurate information or fair evaluation of my actual contributions to family welfare and social responsibility. However, recognizing your professional capabilities does not address the personal dimensions of how our assumptions and behavior have affected you as an individual and as James's wife. Richard continued, demonstrating understanding that relationship repair required emotional acknowledgement beyond simply adjusting business-related assessments of my capabilities and achievements. The conversation was evolving from information sharing toward emotional processing that would be necessary for rebuilding family relationships based on authentic understanding and mutual respect, rather than hierarchical assumptions about social status and individual worth that had characterized previous interactions. James observed his parents' emotional processing with visible relief about finally addressing family dynamics that had been affecting our marriage while creating opportunities for genuine relationships that served everyone's interests through honest communication and accurate understanding of individual circumstances and motivations. Isabella, watching you maintain dignity and grace throughout months of inappropriate treatment while never responding with defensiveness or retaliation has demonstrated character that we failed to recognize or appreciate properly, James said, his voice reflecting admiration for emotional strength that had preserved family relationships despite persistent provocation and unjust assumptions about my motivations. His recognition of my response to difficult treatment provided perspective on how character reveals itself through behavior during challenging circumstances, rather than simply through favorable conditions where positive responses require minimal effort or emotional regulation. The patience I had demonstrated throughout their testing period had actually provided evidence of qualities they claimed to value, but had failed to recognize when displayed consistently over extended periods. The irony is profound that we spent years worried about protecting our family from someone whose character, achievements, and resources exceeded our own, while our behavior demonstrated exactly the kind of superficial judgment and social prejudice that we claimed to reject through our charitable work and community involvement. Eleanor observed, her growing self-awareness revealing how their actions had contradicted stated values about treating people with dignity regardless of perceived social status or economic circumstances. "Marcus, I'm so sorry you're having to deal with this while you're traveling," I replied, genuinely distressed that Rachel's manipulation was affecting him during what should have been a routine business trip. "Rachel called me last night with some very inappropriate confessions and requests. When I rejected her advances and suggested she seek professional help, she apparently decided to contact family members with false accusations about my behavior toward her. Isabella, Rachel told me that you had been making romantic advances that made her uncomfortable, and that when she tried to establish boundaries, you became upset and started making accusations about our marriage," Marcus said, his voice carrying exhaustion rather than anger. "She was crying when she called me, and she seemed genuinely distressed about having to report your behavior to family members." The detail about Rachel crying during her call to Marcus was particularly manipulative, because it would naturally evoke his protective instincts and make him more likely to believe her version of events. She was performing the role of distressed victim, while systematically destroying the relationships that provided stability and support to both Marcus and me. "Marcus, I understand why Rachel's emotional state would make you want to support her," I said carefully, "but I need you to consider some objective questions about her account. In your experience, have I ever behaved inappropriately toward Rachel or made romantic comments about her? Have you ever observed me acting in ways that suggested romantic interest in your wife?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Isabella, I've never seen anything that seemed inappropriate in your interactions with Rachel. You've always been respectful and supportive of our marriage. Then I would ask you to consider why Rachel would wait until now to report behavior that she claims has been ongoing for months," I continued. "If she was genuinely uncomfortable with my conduct, wouldn't it make sense for her to have discussed it with you immediately, rather than suffering in silence while continuing to seek my company and advice?" "That's a fair point," Marcus acknowledged, his voice carrying the first note of skepticism about Rachel's account. "Rachel has mentioned several times recently how much she values your professional guidance and friendship. It would be strange for her to continue pursuing closer contact if she was uncomfortable with your behavior. However, before I could provide additional perspective on Rachel's manipulation, Marcus received another call that he needed to take for his business conference. We agreed to continue our conversation that evening, when he would have more privacy and time to discuss the situation in detail. The pattern of calls that morning revealed the systematic nature of Rachel's manipulation campaign. She had not simply made false accusations but had constructed a comprehensive narrative designed to isolate me from family support, while positioning herself as a victim who deserved sympathy and protection. More disturbing was the realization that Rachel's strategy was working exactly as she had planned. By immediately contacting multiple family members with detailed false accusations, she had created a situation where my truthful account would appear defensive and self-serving, while her lies would seem credible because they were consistent across multiple conversations. The institutional machine that Rachel had activated was not a formal organization, but the informal network of family relationships that normally provided support and stability during personal crises. By systematically feeding false information into that network, she had converted my natural support system into a source of additional pressure and isolation. Understanding the scope of Rachel's manipulation helped me realize that defending myself would require more than simply providing truthful accounts of what had occurred. Rachel had prepared for the possibility that I would deny her accusations by creating explanations that would make my denials appear to be further evidence of inappropriate behavior. The sophistication of her approach suggested that this manipulation campaign had been planned well in advance of our phone conversation, possibly for weeks or months. Rachel had not simply reacted emotionally to my rejection of her inappropriate feelings, but had implemented a strategic plan designed to destroy my relationships with family members, while protecting herself from consequences for her own inappropriate behavior. The recording I had made of our conversation would become essential evidence for exposing Rachel's lies, but I was beginning to understand that simply providing contradictory information would not be sufficient to counter the systematic manipulation she had implemented. Revealing the truth would require demonstrating not just the falsity of her specific accusations, but the calculated nature of her entire campaign to control the family narrative, while pursuing her inappropriate objectives. By the afternoon following Rachel's coordinated campaign of false accusations, I realized that defending myself against her systematic lies would require professional guidance. The complexity of her manipulation strategy and the effectiveness of her narrative control suggested that this situation would escalate beyond simple family disagreements into territory that might require legal protection or professional intervention. I contacted Sarah Mitchell, an attorney who specialized in defamation and harassment cases, having been referred to her by a professional colleague who had faced similar challenges with false accusations in a business context. Sarah's office was located in a downtown Portland building that housed several law firms specializing in civil litigation, and her credentials included extensive experience with cases involving systematic character assassination and reputation damage. During our initial consultation, Sarah listened carefully as I explained the sequence of events that had led to Rachel's false accusations, including the recorded phone conversation where Rachel had confessed her inappropriate feelings and admitted to deliberately undermining her marriage to Marcus. Sarah took detailed notes and asked specific questions about the timeline of events, the nature of Rachel's accusations, and the extent of her campaign to influence family members. Isabella, what you're describing represents a sophisticated defamation strategy that goes beyond simple false accusations, Sarah explained after reviewing the information I had provided. Rachel has created what we call a preemptive narrative, designed to discredit any truthful account you might provide by portraying your honest statements as defensive lies intended to cover up inappropriate behavior. The legal terminology helped me understand why my attempts to defend myself had felt ineffective despite being completely truthful. Rachel had not simply lied about specific incidents but had constructed a comprehensive false framework that would make any contradictory information appear to be further evidence of my supposed guilt. The recording you made of Rachel's confession is potentially valuable evidence, Sarah continued, but using it effectively will require careful consideration of privacy laws and the potential for Rachel to claim that you manipulated or edited the conversation to misrepresent her statements. This revelation was disturbing because it meant that even concrete evidence of Rachel's lies and manipulation might not provide the clear vindication I had hoped for. Sarah explained that individuals who engage in systematic defamation often prepare secondary strategies to undermine evidence that contradicts their false narratives. Furthermore, Sarah added, quote, Rachel's decision to immediately contact multiple family members with false accusations creates what we call witness contamination, where the people who might normally provide character references for you have been influenced by deliberate misinformation designed to make them question your credibility. The legal analysis revealed that Rachel's manipulation strategy was far more sophisticated than I had initially understood. She had not simply made false accusations, but had systematically compromised the relationships and support systems that would normally help someone defend against such accusations. Sarah outlined several options for addressing the situation, each carrying significant costs and risks. Filing a defamation lawsuit would require extensive documentation of damages to my reputation and relationships, along with proof that Rachel's statements were both false and made with malicious intent. The process would likely take months or years to resolve, during which time the false accusations would continue to affect my family relationships and potentially my professional reputation. Isabella, I need to be completely transparent with you about the challenges you're facing, Sarah said, her voice carrying the gravity appropriate to the situation. Even if we can prove that Rachel's accusations are false, the damage to your family relationships may be difficult to repair. People who have been systematically fed false information often resist accepting evidence that contradicts what they've been told, especially when admitting they were deceived, would require acknowledging that they treated someone unfairly based on lies. This psychological insight was perhaps the most devastating aspect of Rachel's manipulation strategy. She had not simply lied about me, but had converted my family members into unwitting participants in her campaign by making them feel personally invested in believing her version of events. Sarah also explained that Rachel's behavior patterns suggested she might escalate her manipulation if she felt threatened by legal action or exposure of her lies. Individuals who engage in this type of systematic deception often respond to challenges by increasing their manipulative behavior rather than retreating. Rachel might make additional false accusations, attempt to involve your professional contacts, or escalate to behavior that could be classified as harassment or stalking. The possibility that defending myself might provoke Rachel to expand her campaign of lies was particularly troubling, because it suggested that any action I took to protect my reputation might actually increase the damage she could cause to my personal and professional relationships. However, Sarah continued, documenting Rachel's behavior and preserving evidence of her manipulation will be essential, regardless of whether you choose to pursue legal action immediately. If her behavior escalates, having comprehensive documentation will strengthen your position and provide law enforcement with clear evidence of a pattern of harassment. Sarah's guidance helped me understand that the trap Rachel had created was more complex than simple false accusations. By systematically compromising my support network and creating legal and social obstacles to defending myself, she had constructed a situation where all available responses carried significant risks and costs. The most immediate challenge was the upcoming family gathering that had been scheduled for the following weekend to celebrate my father's birthday. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a joyful occasion where family members who lived in different cities would gather to maintain connections and share updates about their lives. However, given Rachel's campaign of false accusations, the gathering would likely become an uncomfortable confrontation where family members would pressure me to address her allegations. Sarah advised me to attend the gathering despite the potential for conflict, explaining that avoiding family events would likely be interpreted as evidence of guilt or shame about my alleged behavior. Isabella, your presence at family gatherings demonstrates confidence in your innocence and willingness to address questions about Rachel's accusations directly. Absence would allow Rachel to control the narrative completely, while suggesting that you're afraid to face the people you supposedly wronged. However, Sarah also recommended that I prepare carefully for potential confrontations by documenting my interactions with family members and being strategic about which information to share and when. The goal is to plant seeds of doubt about Rachel's credibility while avoiding appearing defensive or desperate. Focus on asking questions that highlight inconsistencies in her account rather than simply asserting your innocence. This strategic approach felt uncomfortable because it required treating family relationships as tactical challenges rather than sources of natural support and affection. However, Rachel's manipulation had already converted these relationships into battlegrounds where truth and lies would compete for acceptance based on presentation tactics rather than objective merit. Sarah also recommended that I consider the potential impact on my professional reputation if Rachel's false accusations spread beyond family circles into my business network. Isabella, your work in marketing consulting requires maintaining credibility with clients who trust your judgment and professionalism. If Rachel decides to expand her defamation campaign to include professional contacts, the damage could affect your ability to maintain existing client relationships and secure new business opportunities. This possibility was particularly concerning because my professional success had been built through years of careful relationship building and demonstrated expertise. Unlike family relationships, which are based on historical connections and shared experiences, professional relationships depend on current reputation and perceived reliability. False accusations about inappropriate personal behavior could undermine client confidence, even if the accusations were eventually proven false. Sarah suggested developing a proactive communication strategy that would allow me to address potential questions from professional contacts before Rachel's lies could spread through business networks. If clients or colleagues hear rumors about inappropriate behavior, having a clear, brief explanation of the situation will help maintain their confidence in your professionalism while demonstrating that you're handling the matter responsibly. However, this recommendation created another layer of complexity in an already difficult situation. Proactively discussing Rachel's false accusations with professional contacts would risk spreading knowledge of the accusations to people who might never have heard about them otherwise. Yet, waiting to respond until after rumors had spread would mean addressing the situation from a defensive position where the false accusations would already have influenced perceptions. During our consultation, Sarah also addressed the emotional and psychological toll that systematic defamation can create for victims. Isabella, what you're experiencing is a form of psychological warfare designed to make you doubt your own perceptions and exhaust your emotional resources through constant stress and conflict. It's important to understand that the confusion and distress you're feeling are normal responses to an abnormal situation. This perspective was helpful because it validated the difficulty I was experiencing while providing a framework for understanding Rachel's behavior as deliberate strategy rather than emotional crisis or misunderstanding. Recognizing that her manipulation was calculated rather than impulsive helped me understand why rational conversation and emotional appeals had been ineffective in addressing the situation. Sarah recommended that I consider working with a therapist who specialized in helping victims of systematic manipulation and defamation. The psychological tactics that Rachel is using can create lasting effects on your ability to trust your own judgment and maintain confidence in your relationships with others. Professional support will help you process these experiences without allowing them to undermine your long-term emotional well-being. The suggestion that I might need therapy to recover from Rachel's manipulation highlighted the serious nature of the damage she was attempting to cause. Her false accusations were not simply temporary inconveniences but deliberate attacks designed to create lasting harm to my psychological health and relationship capacity. As our consultation concluded, Sarah provided me with detailed recommendations for documenting Rachel's future behavior and preserving evidence that might be needed for legal action or law enforcement intervention. She emphasized that maintaining detailed records would be essential regardless of which specific legal strategies I chose to pursue. Isabella, the most important thing to understand is that you're dealing with someone whose relationship to truth and appropriate behavior has become severely distorted. Sarah explained. Rachel's willingness to systematically lie to multiple family members and manipulate their emotions for her own purposes suggests that she may be capable of escalating to more serious forms of harassment or defamation if she feels threatened by your resistance to her manipulation. This warning helped me understand that the situation I was facing was not simply a family dispute that could be resolved through honest conversation and mutual understanding. Rachel's behavior represented a genuine threat to my reputation, relationships, and emotional well-being that would require strategic response and professional support to address effectively. The legal consultation revealed that Rachel had created a trap that was both comprehensive and sophisticated. By systematically compromising my support network, creating obstacles to defending myself, and preparing for potential challenges to her false narrative, she had constructed a situation where every available response carried significant risks and costs. However, understanding the nature of the trap also provided clarity about the importance of resistance. Accepting Rachel's manipulation and allowing her false accusations to go unchallenged would validate her strategy and potentially encourage her to escalate her behavior. More importantly, it would mean sacrificing my integrity and authentic relationships for the sake of avoiding conflict with someone whose behavior had revealed fundamental incompatibility with healthy family dynamics. The choice I faced was not between easy and difficult options, but between maintaining my principles despite significant costs and abandoning those principles for the sake of temporary peace that would ultimately prove hollow and unsustainable. Understanding this distinction would prove essential for developing the courage and strategic thinking necessary to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. The family gathering for my father's birthday arrived with an atmosphere of tension that was palpable from the moment I entered my parents' home. What should have been a celebration of David Chen's 62nd birthday had transformed into an uncomfortable tribunal, where family members gathered with predetermined judgments about my character, based on Rachel's systematic campaign of false accusations. The gathering included my parents, Patricia and David Chen, my aunt and uncle Margaret and Robert Santos, my cousins Maria Santos and James Chen, along with Marcus and Rachel, who had driven up from their apartments specifically for this event. The normal warmth and spontaneous conversation that characterized family celebrations had been replaced by careful politeness and watchful observation as family members evaluated my behavior for signs of the inappropriate conduct Rachel had described. Rachel arrived wearing a conservative navy dress that projected an image of respectability and restraint, her hair styled in a manner that emphasized professionalism rather than fashion. Her choice of attire was clearly strategic, designed to reinforce the victim narrative she had constructed, while making my own appearance seem potentially inappropriate by comparison. She greeted family members with subdued warmth that suggested someone bravely maintaining composure, despite recent emotional distress. Marcus appeared genuinely conflicted about the situation, his usual comfortable demeanor replaced by careful observation and measured responses to conversation. His confusion was understandable given the contradictory accounts he had received from Rachel and me, along with the pressure he was experiencing from family members who expected him to take a definitive position about his wife's accusations against his sister. The most painful aspect of the gathering was observing how Rachel's manipulation had affected family members who had previously demonstrated consistent affection and support for me. My mother's interactions carried a formality that suggested disappointment mixed with uncertainty about how to address the allegations. My father avoided direct conversation entirely, focusing his attention on other family members in ways that felt deliberately exclusionary. My cousin Maria, who had initially expressed some skepticism about Rachel's accusations during our phone conversation, now maintained careful distance while observing my interactions with other family members. Her behavior suggested that additional conversations with Rachel or other family members had reinforced the false narrative, rather than encouraging critical examination of the accusations. The dinner conversation focused on safe topics such as work developments, neighborhood changes, and plans for upcoming holidays. However, the underlying tension was obvious in the careful way family members avoided mentioning relationships, personal challenges, or anything that might create opportunities for discussing the accusations that everyone was thinking about, but nobody was addressing directly. Rachel participated in these conversations with studied normalcy, contributing appropriate comments about professional projects and family news, while maintaining the demeanor of someone courageously participating in family activities despite recent emotional trauma. Her performance was skilled enough to reinforce her victim narrative, without appearing to seek attention or sympathy directly. The first direct confrontation occurred when my Aunt Margaret approached me privately while other family members were gathered in the living room after dinner. Margaret had always been a source of straightforward advice and emotional support, making her participation in Rachel's manipulation campaign particularly devastating. "Isabella, I need to speak with you about this situation with Rachel," Margaret began, her voice carrying the authoritative tone she typically used when addressing serious family matters. "Several of us are very concerned about what happened between you two, and we think it would be best if you acknowledged your inappropriate behavior and apologized so we can move past this conflict." The suggestion that I should apologize for behavior I had not engaged in while accepting blame for Rachel's manipulation represented exactly the outcome Rachel had been working to achieve. By positioning family members as mediators seeking resolution rather than investigators seeking truth, she had created pressure for me to accept responsibility for her lies in order to restore family harmony. "Aunt Margaret, I understand your desire to resolve family conflict, but I cannot apologize for behavior that did not occur," I replied, keeping my voice respectful but firm. Rachel's accusations are not accurate, and accepting blame for her false statements would not create genuine resolution, but would instead validate a pattern of manipulation that could affect other family relationships. Margaret's expression suggested frustration with my response rather than consideration of my perspective. "Isabella, Rachel was very specific about incidents where you made inappropriate comments and advances. Multiple family members have spoken with her, and her account has been consistent. It seems unlikely that she would fabricate such detailed accusations without some basis in reality." The emphasis on consistency and detail revealed how effectively Rachel's prepared lies were functioning to convince family members of their accuracy. By providing specific false examples rather than general accusations, she had created an appearance of credibility that was difficult to challenge without equally detailed contradictory evidence. "Aunt Margaret, I would ask you to consider Rachel's behavior pattern over the past 2 years, rather than focusing exclusively on her recent accusations," I responded, hoping to direct attention toward objective evidence rather than subjective claims. If I had been making unwelcome advances for months, would it seem reasonable for Rachel to continue seeking my company, requesting professional advice, and including me in social activities? Margaret paused before responding, suggesting that this question had highlighted an inconsistency she had not previously considered. "Isabella, Rachel explained that she was trying to maintain family harmony by not addressing your behavior directly, hoping that you would recognize her discomfort and modify your conduct without requiring confrontation." Once again, Rachel had anticipated potential challenges to her narrative and prepared explanations that would make her lies appear more credible. By claiming that she had been attempting to handle the situation diplomatically, she had created justification for continuing to seek contact with someone who was allegedly making her uncomfortable. The conversation with Margaret revealed the futility of attempting to counter Rachel's systematic lies through logical argument alone. Rachel had prepared comprehensive false narratives that included explanations for every potential inconsistency, making it virtually impossible to expose her deception through conversation with people who were already predisposed to believe her victim narrative. The second confrontation occurred when my cousin James approached me in the kitchen while I was helping clean up after dinner. James had always maintained a protective attitude toward family members, and his participation in addressing Rachel's accusations felt like another betrayal of previously supportive relationships. "Isabella, I think you need to understand how your behavior is affecting everyone in this family," James began, his voice carrying disappointment mixed with anger. "Rachel is married to Marcus, and your inability to respect those boundaries is creating problems for everyone. We need you to acknowledge what you did wrong and commit to changing your behavior." The phrase "inability to respect boundaries" was particularly galling because it suggested that I had deliberately violated clearly established limits rather than being falsely accused of behavior that had never occurred. James was accepting Rachel's narrative so completely that he was treating her accusations as established facts rather than claims that required verification. "James, I have never violated appropriate boundaries with Rachel or anyone else in this family," I replied, recognizing that defending myself required addressing both the false accusations and the assumptions underlying them. The behavior Rachel described did not occur, and her accusations represent a deliberate attempt to manipulate family relationships for purposes that have nothing to do with protecting marriage boundaries. James's response revealed how effectively Rachel's emotional manipulation had influenced family members who were normally skeptical of dramatic accusations. "Isabella, you're asking us to believe that Rachel would lie about something this serious for no apparent reason. That seems much less likely than believing that you made some inappropriate comments and are now trying to avoid taking responsibility." The logic was superficially reasonable but failed to account for Rachel's actual motivations and behavior patterns. By focusing on the implausibility of fabricated accusations while ignoring evidence of Rachel's manipulation strategy, James was applying analytical standards that favored Rachel's prepared lies over my truthful denials. "James, I would ask you to consider Rachel's actual motivations rather than assuming she has no reasons for making false accusations," I responded, hoping to encourage more comprehensive analysis of the situation. People engage in manipulation and false accusations when they believe such tactics will help them achieve objectives that they cannot accomplish through honest means. However, James's response indicated that he was not interested in examining Rachel's motivations or considering alternative explanations for her behavior. "Isabella, you're being paranoid and defensive. Rachel has no reason to lie about this, and multiple family members have confirmed that her account is consistent and detailed." The accusation of paranoia was particularly damaging because it suggested that my resistance to Rachel's false accusations represented psychological instability rather than legitimate self-defense. By framing my attempts to expose her manipulation as evidence of paranoid thinking, family members were creating additional pressure for me to accept blame for behavior I had not engaged in. The most devastating confrontation occurred when my mother approached me privately as the gathering was ending and family members were preparing to leave. Patricia Chen had always been a source of emotional support and practical guidance, making her participation in Rachel's campaign particularly painful. "Isabella, your father and I are very disappointed in your behavior and your unwillingness to accept responsibility for the problems you have created," my mother began, her voice carrying a coldness that I had rarely experienced from her. "Rachel has been nothing but kind and supportive toward you, and your inappropriate advances have put her in an impossible position." The suggestion that Rachel had been nothing but kind and supportive revealed how completely her manipulation had rewritten the family's understanding of our relationship history. My mother was accepting Rachel's victim narrative so thoroughly that she was ignoring years of evidence about Rachel's actual behavior patterns and motivations. "Mother, Rachel's accusations are false, and her victim narrative does not reflect the reality of what occurred between us," I replied, hoping that direct challenge might encourage more critical examination of the situation. "I believe Rachel is manipulating family relationships to serve her own purposes, and accepting her false accusations would validate behavior that could damage other family connections." My mother's response was swift and definitive. Isabella, we will not tolerate conspiracy theories about Rachel's motivations. She has provided specific examples of your inappropriate behavior to multiple family members, and her account has been consistent. Your refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing and apologize is creating additional problems for everyone. The phrase conspiracy theories was particularly damaging because it suggested that any attempt to expose Rachel's manipulation would be dismissed as paranoid fantasy rather than legitimate analysis of suspicious behavior patterns. My mother was effectively prohibiting critical examination of Rachel's accusations, while demanding that I accept blame for behavior that had not occurred. Mother, examining someone's motivations and behavior patterns is not conspiracy thinking but responsible analysis when evaluating serious accusations. I responded, trying to maintain respectful tone while also being clear about the importance of truth over family harmony. Accepting false accusations would not create genuine resolution but would instead reward manipulation and potentially encourage similar behavior in the future. However, my mother's final statement revealed that the isolation campaign had achieved its intended effect. Isabella, until you are willing to acknowledge your inappropriate behavior and apologize to Rachel, your father and I think it would be best if you limited your participation in family gatherings. We cannot continue to subject Rachel to uncomfortable situations while you refuse to accept responsibility for your actions. The threat of exclusion from family activities represented the culmination of Rachel's manipulation strategy. By convincing family members that my presence created discomfort for her while my refusal to accept blame demonstrated ongoing problematic behavior, she had positioned herself as someone who needed protection from my alleged misconduct. The drive home from my parents' house was one of the most isolating experiences of my adult life. Family members who had provided emotional support and practical guidance for 28 years had accepted false accusations about my character and behavior, while refusing to consider evidence that contradicted Rachel's carefully constructed lies. The effectiveness of Rachel's manipulation campaign exceeded even my worst expectations. Not only had she convinced family members to believe her false accusations, but she had also created social pressure that made defending myself appear to be evidence of additional inappropriate behavior. By framing my resistance as defensiveness and paranoia, she had constructed a narrative trap where any attempt to expose her lies would be interpreted as confirmation of my supposed guilt. The isolation was not simply social but psychological, as Rachel's manipulation had created doubt about my own perceptions and judgment among people whose opinions I valued and trusted. The systematic nature of her lies had created a distorted version of reality that felt more compelling to family members than the truth I was attempting to communicate. However, the family gathering also provided crucial insight into the scope and sophistication of Rachel's manipulation strategy. Her ability to maintain consistent false narratives across multiple conversations while anticipating and preparing explanations for potential challenges revealed a level of calculated deception that confirmed my decision to document her behavior and seek professional guidance. The isolation campaign had achieved its immediate objectives by compromising my relationship with family members and creating social pressure for me to accept blame for Rachel's lies. However, it had also exposed the true nature of her manipulation in ways that would eventually provide opportunities to demonstrate the falsity of her accusations and the calculated nature of her campaign to control family dynamics for her own purposes. The week following the disastrous family gathering brought a cascade of consequences that revealed the far-reaching impact of Rachel's manipulation campaign. What began as false accusations within family circles rapidly expanded into threats to my professional reputation, financial security, and psychological well-being that forced me to confront the true cost of standing for truth when surrounded by systematic deception. The first professional blow came through an unexpected phone call from Margaret Riverside, the owner of Northwest Eco Solutions, one of my most significant clients. Margaret's company specialized in sustainable packaging for organic food distributors, and our working relationship had developed over 18 months into a partnership that provided both steady income and opportunities to influence environmentally responsible business practices. Isabella, I received some concerning information about your personal conduct, and I think we need to discuss how it might affect our professional relationship. Margaret began, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone delivering unwelcome news. A family member of yours contacted me to express concerns about potential boundary issues that might affect your ability to maintain appropriate professional relationships. The revelation that Rachel had contacted my business clients was so shocking that I initially struggled to formulate a response. The expansion of her manipulation campaign beyond family relationships into my professional network represented an escalation that threatened the financial foundation of my independence and career stability. Margaret, I need you to understand that the family member who contacted you has been making false accusations designed to damage my personal and professional relationships, I replied, recognizing that defending my reputation would require immediate and clear communication. The boundary issues she described did not occur, and her decision to contact my business clients represents inappropriate interference in professional relationships. Margaret's response revealed that Rachel's false narrative had been persuasive enough to create genuine concern about my professional reliability. Isabella, the person who called me, provided specific examples of inappropriate behavior and expressed concern that similar boundary violations might occur in professional settings. Given the nature of our work together, I need to be confident that you maintain appropriate professional conduct with all clients and colleagues. The phrase "similar boundary violations might occur in professional settings" demonstrated how effectively Rachel had weaponized her false accusations to threaten my career stability. By suggesting that my alleged inappropriate behavior toward her represented a pattern that could affect business relationships, she had created professional liability based entirely on fabricated personal conduct. Margaret, I have maintained exemplary professional conduct throughout my career, and my work with your company has consistently met the highest standards of professionalism and effectiveness. I responded, hoping to focus attention on objective evidence rather than subjective accusations. The family member making these accusations has personal motivations that have nothing to do with legitimate concerns about professional behavior. However, Margaret's next statement revealed the practical reality of reputation-based businesses. Isabella, I understand your position, but I need to consider the potential impact on Northwest Eco Solutions if these allegations become more widely known. Our company's reputation depends on maintaining relationships with clients who trust our judgment about business partnerships. The conversation illuminated how Rachel's strategic targeting of my professional relationships could create a domino effect where clients distanced themselves from me to protect their own reputations, regardless of whether her accusations were true. Fear of association with controversy could damage business relationships, even when the controversy was based entirely on lies. Margaret, I appreciate your concern for your company's reputation, but I hope you will consider the source and motivation behind these accusations before making decisions based on unverified personal allegations. I said, trying to maintain professional composure while also being clear about the stakes involved. I am prepared to provide references from other clients and colleagues who can attest to my professional conduct and reliability. The conversation ended with Margaret agreeing to postpone any immediate decisions about our working relationship while requesting time to consider the situation. However, her tone suggested that the damage to our professional partnership might already be irreversible, regardless of whether she eventually concluded that Rachel's accusations were false. The second professional impact came through a more subtle but equally damaging channel. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the director of the Sustainable Business Consortium, where I served on the advisory board, called to discuss concerns that had been raised about my continued participation in the organization's upcoming conference on green marketing strategies. Isabella, we've received some unofficial inquiries about your personal conduct that have created concerns among board members about potential controversy at the conference, Elena explained, her voice carrying the diplomatic tone of someone navigating institutional politics. While we value your professional contributions, some members feel that unresolved personal allegations might create distractions from the conference's environmental focus. The phrase "unofficial inquiries" suggested that Rachel's campaign had reached into professional networks beyond my direct client relationships, creating whisper campaigns that could damage my reputation within the broader sustainable business community where my expertise and connections had been built over years of dedicated work. Elena, I need you to understand that the personal allegations you're referencing are false accusations made by someone who is attempting to damage my professional standing for personal reasons. I replied, recognizing that my response to these professional threats would need to be more assertive than my approach to family conflicts. My personal conduct has always been exemplary, and allowing unverified accusations to affect professional opportunities would set a dangerous precedent for the organization. Elena's response revealed the institutional challenges created by reputation-based attacks. Isabella, I personally believe in your professionalism and integrity, but the board's concern is about potential disruption to the conference if these personal issues become a focus of attention rather than the environmental topics we're trying to promote. The conversation highlighted how manipulative individuals can leverage social discomfort with controversy to achieve their destructive objectives without ever needing to prove their accusations. By simply creating uncertainty and potential conflict, Rachel's lies could affect my professional opportunities regardless of their truth value. The financial implications of these professional threats became clear when I reviewed my client contracts and income projections for the following quarter. Northwest Eco Solutions represented approximately 30% of my monthly income, and losing that client would require either replacing their revenue quickly or significantly reducing my living expenses. The Sustainable Business Consortium Conference had been expected to generate new client leads that would expand my business. Being excluded from that opportunity would limit my ability to maintain financial stability while defending against Rachel's ongoing attacks. However, the most devastating personal cost came through the deterioration of my relationship with Marcus, whose confusion and pain over the conflicting accounts of events had created distance between us for the first time in our adult lives. His phone calls became less frequent and more stilted. Our conversations focused on practical matters rather than the personal connection that had always characterized our sibling relationship. During one particularly difficult conversation, Marcus's exhaustion with the situation became apparent. "Isabella, I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted, his voice carrying a weariness that broke my heart. "Rachel is my wife, and she's been consistent about what happened between you two. But you're my sister, and I've never known you to lie about anything important. I feel like I'm being forced to choose between the two most important women in my life." The pain in Marcus's voice revealed how Rachel's manipulation was achieving its intended effect of destroying the close relationship between Marcus and me while positioning herself as the wronged party who deserved his loyalty and protection. Her false accusations had created a situation where supporting me would require Marcus to acknowledge that his wife was systematically lying about serious allegations. "Marcus, I understand how difficult this situation is for you, and I don't want to force you to choose between relationships that should be able to coexist," I replied, hoping to preserve some connection while also being honest about the reality of Rachel's manipulation. "However, I need you to know that Rachel's accusations are false, and her decision to involve family members and professional contacts suggests motivations that go beyond simply addressing alleged inappropriate behavior." Marcus's response revealed the psychological toll that Rachel's manipulation was taking on him as well. "Isabella, if Rachel is lying about something this serious, it would mean that my marriage is based on deception, and that I've been defending someone who deliberately tried to destroy my relationship with my sister. I don't know how to process that possibility." The conversation illuminated the sophisticated cruelty of Rachel's strategy. By creating a situation where Marcus would have to acknowledge devastating betrayal by his wife in order to support his sister, she had made it psychologically easier for him to accept her lies than to confront the full scope of her manipulation. The emotional toll of these escalating costs began affecting my daily functioning in ways that concerned me. Sleep became elusive as I replayed conversations and analyzed strategies for defending myself against systematic lies. Concentration during work became difficult as anxiety about the next professional attack interfered with my ability to focus on client projects. Social activities lost their appeal as I became hypervigilant about potential gossip or judgment from people who might have heard distorted versions of Rachel's accusations. The isolation was particularly acute because the false accusations had compromised the relationships that would normally provide emotional support during difficult periods. Family members who might have offered guidance and encouragement had instead become sources of additional pressure and judgment. Professional colleagues who might have provided perspective and networking opportunities had become potential threats who might have been influenced by Rachel's campaign. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the therapist Sarah Mitchell had recommended, helped me understand that the psychological symptoms I was experiencing represented normal responses to abnormal circumstances rather than personal weakness or inadequate coping skills. Isabella, what you're dealing with is a form of psychological warfare designed to make you doubt your own perceptions while exhausting your emotional resources through constant stress and conflict, she explained during our first session. The therapeutic perspective provided crucial insight into Rachel's manipulation strategy and its intended effects. Individuals who engage in systematic defamation often target their victims, support systems, and professional relationships, specifically because isolation makes people more vulnerable to accepting false narratives about themselves. The goal is to create situations where accepting blame for behavior that didn't occur seems easier than continuing to fight against lies that are systematically supported by manipulated social pressure. Dr. Walsh's analysis helped me understand that my resistance to Rachel's manipulation was psychologically healthy rather than stubborn or defensive, despite the social costs it was creating. Maintaining your commitment to truth and refusing to accept blame for behavior that didn't occur demonstrates psychological strength and integrity. The difficulty you're experiencing comes from the conflict between standing for your principles and the natural human need for social connection and family support. However, the therapeutic insight also highlighted the long-term challenges I would face in recovering from Rachel's attacks. The effects of systematic manipulation and defamation can persist long after the immediate conflict is resolved. Learning to trust your own perceptions again and rebuilding relationships that have been damaged by lies requires time and often professional support. The financial cost of therapy, legal consultation, and potential income loss from professional damage created additional stress that compounded the emotional toll of Rachel's attacks. Defending myself against her false accusations was becoming expensive in ways that went far beyond the immediate social and family costs. As the week progressed, I realized that Rachel's escalation to professional threats represented a critical turning point in the conflict. Her willingness to jeopardize my career stability and financial security demonstrated that her manipulation campaign was not motivated by genuine emotional distress, but by calculated determination to punish me for rejecting her inappropriate advances. The choice I faced was becoming clearer but also more daunting. I could accept the professional and financial damage while hoping that Rachel's attacks would eventually subside, or I could fight back using the evidence I had documented while risking further escalation of her manipulation campaign. The recorded phone conversation where Rachel had confessed her inappropriate feelings and admitted to deliberately undermining her marriage to Marcus remained my strongest evidence of her deception. However, using that evidence would likely provoke her to escalate her attacks in ways that could cause additional damage to my professional reputation and family relationships. Dr. Walsh's guidance helped me understand that the decision about how to respond to Rachel's escalating manipulation would need to be based on my long-term well-being and principles rather than short-term conflict avoidance. Isabella, appeasing manipulative individuals rarely resolves the conflict but often encourages them to continue their harmful behavior. Standing up to systematic manipulation requires courage and often involves temporary increases in conflict before resolution becomes possible. The personal costs of Rachel's manipulation had reached levels that threatened my financial security, professional reputation, and psychological well-being. However, those same costs had also clarified the stakes involved and the importance of exposing her lies before she could cause additional damage to other relationships and opportunities. The foundation of my life that had once felt secure and stable continued to erode under Rachel's systematic attacks. But the destruction was also revealing which elements of that foundation were genuinely solid, and which had been built on relationships that could be manipulated through strategic lies and emotional pressure. The third week following Rachel's initial false accusations brought the systematic destruction of the remaining support structures that had anchored my personal and social life. What had begun as family dysfunction and professional threats evolved into comprehensive isolation as Rachel's manipulation campaign reached into friendships, community connections, and social networks I had built over years of authentic relationship development. The first devastating blow came through my closest friendship with Amanda Torres, whom I had known since graduate school and who had been my confidant through every major life transition over the past 8 years. Amanda worked as an environmental lawyer specializing in corporate sustainability compliance, and our friendship had been built on shared professional values, intellectual compatibility, and mutual support through career challenges and personal growth. Amanda's call came on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing client proposals, trying to maintain professional productivity, despite the constant stress of defending against Rachel's ongoing attacks. Her voice carried an uncomfortable formality that immediately indicated this conversation would not provide the emotional support I desperately needed. "Isabella, I've been hearing some concerning information about your personal conduct, and I think we need to discuss how it might affect our friendship." Amanda began, using language that echoed the professional distancing I had encountered from business contacts. "Rachel Morrison reached out to me because she was worried about my safety given the inappropriate behavior you allegedly exhibited toward her." The revelation that Rachel had contacted Amanda was particularly devastating because it represented an invasion of the one relationship that had remained untouched by family manipulation and professional threats. Amanda had been my closest friend, the person I might have turned to for perspective and emotional support during this crisis. Rachel's decision to target that relationship demonstrated the comprehensive nature of her campaign to isolate me completely. "Amanda, Rachel's accusations are false, and her decision to contact my friends represents an escalation of manipulation designed to destroy every supportive relationship in my life," I replied, hoping that years of friendship would provide some immunity against Rachel's lies. The inappropriate behavior she described did not occur, and her version of events directly contradicts what actually happened during our phone conversation. However, Amanda's response revealed that Rachel's manipulation had been strategically crafted to exploit Amanda's professional knowledge and personal concerns. "Isabella, Rachel provided specific details about your alleged advances toward her, including descriptions of behavior that could be classified as sexual harassment in professional contexts. As someone who works in legal compliance, I'm concerned about the potential implications of maintaining close friendship with someone who might be engaging in predatory behavior." The use of terms like sexual harassment and predatory behavior represented a significant escalation in Rachel's false narrative. By reframing her fabricated accusations in legal language that would resonate with Amanda's professional expertise, Rachel had created particularly compelling reasons for Amanda to distance herself from our friendship. "Amanda, I need you to understand that Rachel is using your legal expertise to make her lies appear more credible and serious than they actually are," I responded, recognizing that defending myself would require addressing both the false accusations and the strategic way they were being presented. The behavior she described did not occur in any context, professional or personal. Her decision to contact you directly demonstrates that this is a manipulation campaign rather than legitimate concern about inappropriate conduct. Amanda's pause was longer than any pause should be in a conversation between close friends who had supported each other through years of personal and professional challenges. "Isabella, I want to believe you, but Rachel seemed genuinely distressed when she called me. She provided specific examples of your alleged behavior and expressed concern that you might escalate to more serious boundary violations if you don't receive professional help." The phrase "escalate to more serious boundary violations" revealed how Rachel was using implied threats about future misconduct to make her current lies appear to be warnings about dangerous behavior patterns. By suggesting that I might become more problematic without intervention, she was creating urgency around accepting her false narrative. "Amanda, Rachel is manipulating your concern for safety to make you complicit in isolating me from supportive relationships," I replied, hoping that direct analysis of Rachel's tactics might help Amanda recognize the manipulation. The distress she exhibited during her call to you was performance designed to make her lies appear credible, not genuine emotion about experienced harassment. However, Amanda's final statement revealed that Rachel's strategy had achieved its intended effect. "Isabella, I think it would be best if we took a break from our friendship while you address these personal issues. I can't maintain close relationships with someone whose behavior might represent the kind of liability concerns I deal with professionally." The loss of Amanda's friendship was devastating, not only because of our personal connection, but because it represented the destruction of the relationship I had most relied upon for emotional support and objective perspective. Amanda's decision to end our friendship based on Rachel's lies eliminated my primary source of external validation that I was not the problematic person Rachel's manipulation campaign was portraying me to be. The second relationship casualty came through my participation in the Portland Environmental Action Network, a community organization where I had volunteered for 3 years, organizing educational events and fundraising campaigns. My involvement with PN had provided both social connection and opportunities to contribute to environmental causes that aligned with my professional expertise and personal values. Lisa Chen, the organization's coordinator, contacted me to discuss concerns that had been raised about my continued participation in upcoming events. Lisa's voice carried the diplomatic tone of someone managing institutional politics while trying to minimize conflict within volunteer organizations. Isabella, we've received information suggesting that you might be dealing with some personal conduct issues that could create uncomfortable situations during our community events, Lisa explained, using carefully neutral language that avoided direct accusations while clearly indicating that my participation was no longer welcome. While we appreciate your past contributions, some volunteers have expressed concerns about potential inappropriate behavior that might affect the comfortable, safe environment we try to maintain. The phrase uncomfortable situations during community events demonstrated how Rachel's false accusations were being weaponized to exclude me from community activities where social comfort was prioritized over truth or fairness. By creating the possibility of awkwardness or conflict, Rachel's lies could affect my social participation regardless of their accuracy. Lisa, I need you to understand that the conduct issues you're referencing are based on false accusations made by someone who is systematically targeting my personal and professional relationships. I replied, recognizing that my response to community exclusion would need to be more assertive than my approach to family conflicts. My behavior during all PN activities has been exemplary, and there is no evidence of inappropriate conduct in any community context. Lisa's response revealed the practical challenges facing volunteer organizations when confronted with allegations they are not equipped to investigate or resolve. Isabella, I believe you're a good person, but our organization doesn't have the resources to mediate personal disputes or investigate conduct allegations. Our priority has to be maintaining an environment where all volunteers feel safe and comfortable participating. The conversation illuminated how Rachel's manipulation exploited the institutional limitations of community organizations that depend on volunteer participation and harmonious relationships. By creating uncertainty about my conduct, her lies could affect my community involvement without requiring any verification or due process. The exclusion from PN was particularly painful because environmental activism had been one of the ways I connected my professional expertise with community service and social impact. Losing that opportunity eliminated another source of meaning and social connection, while reinforcing the isolation Rachel was systematically creating. The third major relationship loss occurred through my social connection with the hiking group I had joined 2 years earlier. The Cascade Mountain Club organized weekend hiking expeditions that had provided both physical activity and social connections with people who shared interests in outdoor recreation and environmental appreciation. Jennifer Walsh, one of the group's organizers, called to discuss what she described as concerning reports about personal behavior that might affect group dynamics during overnight hiking trips. Jennifer's approach was more direct than the institutional diplomacy I had encountered from professional and community contacts. Isabella, someone contacted several group members to express concerns about your personal conduct with women in social settings. Jennifer explained, her voice carrying genuine concern mixed with uncertainty about how to handle allegations she was not equipped to evaluate. Given that our hiking trips often involve shared accommodations and close social interactions, some members are uncomfortable with your continued participation. The expansion of Rachel's false narrative to include concerns about my behavior toward women in general represented another escalation in her manipulation campaign. By suggesting that her allegations indicated a pattern of inappropriate conduct toward multiple women, she was creating broader safety concerns that would make my exclusion from mixed-gender social activities appear reasonable and necessary. Jennifer, the person who contacted group members is making false accusations designed to isolate me from all social activities and relationships. I replied, recognizing that defending myself against generalized allegations would be even more difficult than addressing specific false claims. My conduct during all hiking activities has been appropriate and respectful. and there is no evidence of problematic behavior toward any group members. Jennifer's response reflected the challenge facing social groups when confronted with serious allegations. Isabella, I understand your frustration, but several members have expressed discomfort with the possibility of inappropriate behavior during trips. We have to prioritize the safety and comfort of all participants. The conversation ended with Jennifer suggesting that I voluntarily withdraw from upcoming hiking trips while working through these personal issues. The phrase "working through personal issues" implied that Rachel's false accusations represented legitimate problems that I needed to address rather than lies that I needed to expose and counter. The loss of hiking group participation eliminated another source of physical activity, social connection, and stress relief during a period when I desperately needed all three. Rachel's manipulation was systematically removing the activities and relationships that might have provided emotional support and perspective during the crisis she had created. The most devastating personal loss came through the deterioration of my relationship with my longtime neighbor and friend, Mrs. Eleanor Hastings, an elderly woman who had become like a surrogate grandmother since I had moved into my apartment building 4 years earlier. Eleanor had been a source of wisdom, comfort, and practical support, often inviting me for tea and conversation when she sensed I was dealing with work stress or personal challenges. Eleanor's change in behavior was subtle, but unmistakable. Her usual warm greetings in the hallway became polite nods, and her invitations for tea disappeared entirely. When I encountered her in the building's lobby, she seemed to avoid extended conversation while maintaining surface-level politeness that suggested discomfort rather than genuine friendliness. The shift in Eleanor's behavior was particularly painful because she had never directly addressed whatever concerns might be affecting our relationship. Instead, her withdrawal was evident only through the absence of warmth and connection that had previously characterized our interactions. The uncertainty about what she might have heard or believed about me created additional anxiety while eliminating a relationship that had provided consistent emotional support. During one brief encounter in the building's mailroom, Eleanor's stiff politeness finally prompted me to address the situation directly. Mrs. Hastings, I've noticed that we haven't spent time together recently, and I'm concerned that someone might have shared information about me that has affected your comfort with our friendship. Eleanor's response was carefully measured, suggesting that she had indeed received disturbing information but was uncertain about how to address it appropriately. Isabella, I think it might be best if we maintained a more neighborly distance while you work through whatever personal challenges you might be facing. The phrase "personal challenges" indicated that Eleanor had been given information that portrayed Rachel's false accusations as legitimate problems requiring my attention and resolution. Eleanor's withdrawal represented the loss of another source of unconditional support and practical wisdom during a crisis when such resources were desperately needed. The systematic destruction of my support network had achieved Rachel's apparent objective of creating comprehensive isolation that would make accepting blame for her false accusations appear to be the only path toward restoring social connection and family harmony. By targeting friendships, community involvement, and neighborly relationships, she had eliminated the external validation and emotional support that might have helped me maintain confidence in my own perceptions and judgment. However, the comprehensive nature of Rachel's attacks also provided crucial insight into the calculated and strategic nature of her manipulation campaign. The coordination required to contact multiple unconnected individuals and organizations with consistent false narratives demonstrated that her behavior was not emotional reaction or temporary distress, but deliberate campaign designed to destroy my life systematically. Dr. Walsh's therapeutic guidance became increasingly important as the isolation deepened. Isabella, what you're experiencing represents comprehensive social and psychological warfare designed to make you doubt your own reality, while eliminating the relationships that might provide alternative perspectives. The systematic nature of these attacks confirms that you're dealing with deliberate manipulation rather than legitimate concerns about your conduct. The therapeutic perspective helped me understand that my increasing sense of unreality and self-doubt represented normal responses to abnormal circumstances, rather than evidence that Rachel's accusations might contain elements of truth. When someone systematically targets all your support relationships while providing consistent false narratives to multiple unconnected individuals, the goal is to create psychological isolation that makes their version of events appear more credible than your own memory and experience. Dr. Walsh also emphasized that maintaining commitment to truth during comprehensive isolation required extraordinary psychological strength and clear thinking. Isabella, the fact that you're continuing to resist false accusations despite mounting social pressure demonstrates remarkable integrity and psychological health. Most people would have accepted blame for behavior they didn't engage in rather than enduring this level of systematic attack. The support system that had anchored my emotional well-being and social identity had crumbled under Rachel's strategic manipulation, but the destruction had also revealed which relationships were built on authentic connection versus social convenience. The comprehensive nature of the isolation was devastating, but it was also clarifying about the true character of the person who had orchestrated it and the importance of exposing her lies before she could cause additional damage to other potential targets. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.